Welcome, dear friends. Today I will tell you a chilling story of love, betrayal, and the unbreakable resilience of man. Enjoy the story. Tara Winthrop, pale and gaunt, clung to her husband Paul's arm as they entered the gleaming lobby of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. The mysterious illness ravaging her once vibrant body had brought them here in desperate search of answers. "Tara, is that really you?" a familiar voice called out. She turned to see Dr. Michael Brentwood, her childhood sweetheart, striding towards them in a crisp, white lab coat. The years had been kind to him, still tall and handsome, now with an air of confidence befitting the hospital's esteemed chief administrator. "Michael, what a surprise," Tara said, mustering a weak smile. "I had no idea you worked here." "I'm so glad to see you, though I wish it were under better circumstances," Michael said, his blue eyes shining with sincerity. "I promise we'll get to the bottom of what's ailing you. I'll oversee your treatment myself." Paul stepped forward, drawing Tara closer. "That won't be necessary, Dr. Brentwood. Tara has her own physician." "I insist," Michael said. "Nothing is more important to me than Tara's well-being." "How noble," Paul sneered. "But I won't have my wife fawned over by lovesick fools. Come, Tara." He practically dragged her towards the exit. "Lovesick fool," Tara said once they were outside. "Michael's an old friend. He was just being kind." Paul whirled on her, his handsome face twisting into an ugly mask of rage. "Don't play innocent with me. I saw the way you two looked at each other, whoring around under my very nose. Have you no shame?" Tara recoiled as if slapped. "That's not true. I would never—" But Paul was beyond reason. He shoved her into the car and slammed the door, seething with barely suppressed fury. As the car wound through the canyons of L.A., Tara's thoughts drifted to happier times, before tragedy and deceit had shattered her world. Her parents, Thomas and Elizabeth Winthrop, had been pillars of New York society. Her father, a real estate mogul, was gregarious and larger than life. Her mother was a renowned philanthropist and devoted wife. Their love story had been one for the ages, until that horrible day when her father's plane went down en route to a business meeting in Chicago. The FAA never determined the cause of the crash that claimed his life and 3 others. Elizabeth fell into a deep depression after Thomas's death. No longer did her musical laughter fill the halls of their Park Avenue penthouse. She took to her bed, shutting out the world and her grieving daughter. It was Conrad Prescott, Paul's uncle, Thomas's best friend and business partner, who finally drew Elizabeth out of her shell. Patient and soft-spoken, he coaxed her to rejoin the land of the living. Under his attentive care, color returned to her cheeks and light to her eyes. No one was surprised when Conrad proposed and Elizabeth accepted. It seemed like a perfect match. The dashing widower and the beautiful widow, united by shared loss and love. But their marriage was not the fairy tale everyone believed. After the wedding, Tara left to study art history at the Sorbonne, hoping to become a museum curator like her mother. She was very tired of Conrad's increasingly erratic behavior, his bursts of temper and paranoid accusations. By the time she returned for summer break, her mother was a shell of her former self, wan, hopeless, submissive to Conrad's every whim. He had banned Elizabeth's friends from the house, claiming they were a bad influence. Even Tara was treated like an unwanted guest in her own home. She escaped to the Hamptons and found solace in Michael's arms. He was interning at Southampton Hospital that summer before starting medical school at Harvard. They would stroll along the windswept beaches, planning their future together, until Conrad caught them kissing behind the pool house. He flew into a rage, screaming that Tara was a wanton Jezebel, just like her mother. He threatened to cut her off without a cent, unless she stopped seeing that boy. Michael wanted to elope, to hell with Conrad and his money. But Tara refused to abandon her mother. She ended things with Michael and returned to Paris, nursing her broken heart. 2 months later, her mother was dead. The official cause was an accidental overdose of sleeping pills, but Tara knew something was amiss. Her mother never took more than the prescribed dosage. And why were all the pill bottles missing from the medicine cabinet? Then Conrad was killed in a hit-and-run a week after the funeral. The police never found the culprit. Once again, Tara was an orphan, haunted by questions that had no answers. "Darling, we're home," Paul said, startling her from her reverie. Tara looked up at the Italianate mansion in Beverly Hills that Paul called the honeymoon cottage. It had been a wedding gift from his parents, along with a trust fund and a seat on the board of his family's pharma company. The perfect fairy tale for a bereaved heiress. At first, Paul had been her rock, so solicitous and sympathetic. She'd been swept off her feet by his whirlwind courtship. After a quickie wedding in Vegas, they'd embarked on a round-the-world honeymoon. Paul took charge of her inheritance, assuring her that she needn't worry her pretty little head about tedious financial matters. He hired a new staff, saying they needed people they could trust. Tara was so grateful to have a strong, decisive man to lean on. Then she fell ill with a mysterious ailment that left her weak and dependent. Paul brought in a series of doctors, but none could find the cause of her symptoms. He insisted on handling her meds himself, claiming she was forgetful and might accidentally overdose. At night he was insatiable, groping her with bruising fingers even as she begged him to stop, that she was too exhausted. "Don't be such a prude," he'd growl. "I'm your husband. You have wifely duties to perform." The verbal abuse escalated to physical violence. He would slap her for disagreeing with him, shove her for disrespecting him in front of the help. "Look what you made me do!" he'd shout as she cowered on the floor. "It's your fault for provoking me." Tara knew she should leave, but where would she go? Paul had isolated her from her friends, and her family was dead. She was utterly dependent on him for everything. So she retreated into a numb haze of depression and despair, hoping each day would be her last. At least then the pain would finally end. "Here, darling, take your vitamins," Paul said, handing Tara a glass of water and a handful of pills. He always insisted on giving her the nightly meds himself. Tara hesitated. The pills looked different than usual, larger and a sickly green color. "What are these? They're not my regular vitamins." "Just some new supplements Dr. Smith recommended," Paul said breezily, "to help with your fatigue. Now be a good girl and swallow them down." Too weak to argue, Tara did as he asked. The pills stuck in her throat and she gagged, the room suddenly spinning around her. I don't feel well." Paul smiled, a cold reptilian thing. "Just lie down, my love. You'll feel better soon." Tara collapsed onto the bed as a wave of dizziness engulfed her. The last thing she saw before losing consciousness was Paul standing over her, his handsome face a mask of cruel satisfaction. Tara awoke in a dark room, head pounding. She could hear the faint murmur of voices through the thin walls. Straining to make out the words, she crept closer and pressed her ear against the peeling wallpaper. "Won't be long now," a man said. Tara recognized the voice as Paul's. "Smith says the poison will make her death seem natural when the autopsy is done. And then you'll inherit everything, just as we planned," a woman purred. "Oh, darling, I can't wait to be rid of her and have you all to myself at last." Laura, Paul's mistress and accomplice. The vicious trollop had made Tara's life a living hell this past year with her smug looks and thinly veiled insults. Now Tara understood why. "Indeed, my love," Paul said. "With the Winthrop fortune under our control, no one can touch us. We'll be the king and queen of LA society." "I still think we should have just shot her and dumped the body in the desert," Laura grumbled. "All this cloak and dagger poisoning business is too bloody risky." "Nonsense, it's all going according to plan," Paul said. "Soon Tara will take her place next to her pathetic parents, and I'll be a grieving, wealthy widower. The perfect alibi." Rage and terror warred within Tara as the pieces fell into place. It hadn't been an accident that killed her father, or an overdose that claimed her mother, and Conrad's hit and run? All orchestrated by Paul in his Machiavellian scheme to gain her fortune. She was next, unless she found a way to turn the tables on her would-be murderer. Tara slumped to the floor, feigning unconsciousness as the door creaked open. Paul hovered above her, checking her pulse with cold, impersonal fingers. "Out like a light," he reported. "The next dose should finish her off." Tara lay still, barely daring to breathe until his footsteps receded down the hall. Adrenaline flooded her veins, temporarily overriding her weakness. She had to get out of here, had to find help before they gave her more poison. But in her disoriented state, she couldn't tell if her surroundings were real or a hallucination. Tara stumbled to the window, fumbling with the locks. A wave of despair washed over her. They were sealed shut and barred. There would be no escape that way. "Think, Tara, think," she muttered. Her addled mind dredged up a memory from childhood, using a spoon to jimmy open a locked drawer in her father's study. It had worked then. Maybe it would work now. She crept to the door and tried the handle. Locked, of course, but the keyhole was an old-fashioned one, large enough to fit a spoon handle. If she could just find something to use as a makeshift key. Tara scanned the room, her heart leaping as she spotted a rickety nightstand. One of the legs was loose, the wood around the screws worn away. She dropped to her knees and worked one free, sending up a silent prayer of thanks. The narrow end fit the keyhole perfectly. Tara held her breath and turned it slowly, carefully, until she felt the unmistakable click of the lock giving way. She eased the door open, heart pounding a staccato beat as she scanned the darkened hallway for any sign of her captors. All was silent and still. Perhaps this was her chance. Tara wobbled down the corridor on shaky legs, using the wall for support. The house was a maze of shadows and vague shapes that shifted before her eyes. More than once she had to stop and shake her head to clear the hallucinations. At the top of the staircase, a wave of nausea overwhelmed her. Tara sank to her knees, retching bile onto the threadbare runner. The world spun sickeningly as a high, cruel laugh rang in her ears. "Going somewhere, my love?" Paul stood at the bottom of the stairs, a malevolent smile playing about his sensuous mouth. He held a syringe in one hand, the needle glinting in the dim light. "You didn't really think you could escape me, did you? You'll never leave this house alive." Despair crashed over Tara as the horrible realization hit. This was the end. All her struggles, all her hopes and dreams had been for nothing. Paul would win, as he always did. "Michael," she whispered, a final prayer to the only man she'd ever loved. "I'm sorry. Forgive me." Then she surrendered to the beckoning oblivion, the world fading to black as strong arms caught her before she hit the floor. Tara floated in a sea of light, weightless and free. The pain was gone, replaced by a sense of warmth and peace she'd never known in life. So this was death. It wasn't so bad. Maybe now she could finally rest, but something nagged at the edges of her consciousness. A voice, achingly familiar, calling her name over and over. "Tara! Tara, can you hear me? Please, darling, open your eyes." With great effort, Tara dragged herself back to awareness. She blinked against the harsh fluorescent glare, the astringent scent of disinfectant flooding her nostrils. Was this heaven? It looked more like a hospital room. "Oh, thank God," the voice said, choked with relief. "I thought I'd lost you." Tara turned her head and found herself drowning in a pair of brilliant blue eyes, eyes she'd know anywhere. "Michael," she whispered through parched lips, "are we dead?" He laughed, a slightly hysterical edge to the sound. "No, my love, we're very much alive, and I plan to stay that way for the next 50 years at least, with you by my side, if you'll have me." Confusion swirled through her battered mind. "I don't understand. What happened? The last thing I remember is Paul cornering me with a syringe." Michael's face darkened with fury. "That bastard won't ever hurt you again. He's in police custody, along with Dr. Smith and that snake Laura. It's over, Tara. You're safe now." He explained how he'd confronted Dr. Smith about Tara's condition, realizing something was amiss from her test results. The vitamins Paul had been giving her were actually a slow-acting poison. Once he had proof, Michael went to the police. They'd tracked Paul to the abandoned house where he held Tara captive, catching him in the act of trying to kill her. The whole sordid conspiracy had unraveled. Paul's role in her family's deaths, his plot to inherit her fortune, Dr. Smith's complicity. "But what about the poison?" Tara asked, fear spiking through her. "Am I going to be okay?" Michael squeezed her hand. "We've flushed most of it out of your system, but I won't lie. There may be some long-term effects we can't predict yet. We'll deal with those as they come. Together." Tears spilled down Tara's cheeks as the enormity of it all crashed over her. "You saved my life, in more ways than one." He brushed his lips across her knuckles. "You saved mine first. Loving you, being loved by you, it's what I'm made for. I'll never let you go again." Tara tugged him down for a long, sweet kiss, pouring all her joy and gratitude into the caress. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The revelations about her family were a heavy burden to bear. Her health was still precarious. The media circus would be relentless. But with Michael by her side, Tara felt she could face anything. For the first time in her life, she dared to hope for a future filled with love and happiness. 1 year later, Tara stretched out on the picnic blanket, her cheeks flushed from the warm California sun. She and Michael had escaped to the deserted cove they'd claimed as theirs back when they were young and impossibly in love. So much had changed since then. She was divorced, damaged, still wrestling with the demons of her past. Weekly therapy sessions were helping her make peace with all she'd endured. Yoga and meditation kept her centered. But the biggest change of all, the one currently fluttering beneath her heart, was the secret she'd been waiting for the perfect moment to reveal. As if on cue, Michael returned from his foraging, a cluster of wildflowers in one hand and his ever-present medical bag in the other. He never let Tara out of his sight for long these days. "For you, my goddess," he said, presenting the colorful blooms with a flourish. Tara buried her nose in the fragrant petals. "They're lovely, thank you." He settled beside her, pulling her into the circle of his arms. "How are you feeling? Any dizziness? Shortness of breath? Blurred vision?" "I'm fine, Dr. Brentwood," she teased him. "Just a bit tired, but that's to be expected." Michael's brow furrowed. "Expected? Why? Have you been overdoing it again? You know you need to take things slow until we're sure." Tara silenced him with a finger to his lips. "I'm tired because I'm growing a whole new person inside me, silly. That tends to take a lot out of a girl." His eyes widened, jaw dropping open in shock. You mean, you're pregnant?" She nodded, biting her lip to hide her grin. "About 8 weeks along, according to my calculations. I've suspected for a while, but I wanted to be sure before I told you." Michael whooped with joy, scooping her into a giddy embrace. "We're having a baby! I'm going to be a father!" He peppered her face with kisses, laughing and crying all at once. Tara laced her fingers through his, marveling at the perfect fit. "We're going to be parents," she confirmed, wonder and trepidation mingling in her voice. "Can you believe it?" He cupped her face in his hands, his expression tender. "Oh, my love, you've already proven how incredibly brave and strong and resilient you are. You're going to be an amazing mother, and I'll be with you every step of the way." Emotion clogged her throat. After all the loss and heartache she'd suffered, Tara had thought happiness like this would never be hers. Yet here she was, in the arms of the man she adored, their love creating a new life full of promise and possibility. She thought of the child they'd created, a perfect blend of her and Michael, untouched by the darkness of the past. A fresh start, a second chance for them both. There would be challenges ahead, Tara knew. Pregnancy was daunting under the best of circumstances. Factor in her unusual medical history and the media scrutiny they still endured, and things were bound to get complicated. But she had Michael now, and their precious baby, a family of her own to love and protect. What's more, she had herself, stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to build a beautiful life from the ashes of tragedy. Tara Winthrop had been to hell and back. She'd stared evil in the face and lived to tell the tale. Whatever the future held, she would meet it head-on, with courage, grace, and hope in her heart. For the first time in forever, she was truly excited to see what tomorrow would bring.